on it's based on Farmer Time, and we're very lucky to have Kirstie McAdoo here with us today. Kirstie is head of education and research at Airfield Estate. So she, I suppose, is really a massive advocate for promoting Farmer Time and heavily involved in connecting that, I suppose, the farmer to the school. And I know the main goal of that is to make sure that, you know, a young person goes out into society kind of more educated around what goes on a farm. And like, as we all probably are aware, it's very disconnected at times. And I would even say my own sister-in-law asked me recently what kind of herd of cows we have. So that she grew up on the farm. So that'll tell you how the disconnect can happen within a farm. So I suppose it's just Kirstie's going to give us a good insight onto the importance of being our own advocates for our own farms, and especially to, you know, be involved if you can be in that kind of area as well, just to make sure that we are, I suppose, advocating as much as we can for younger people, and making them aware of what goes on inside the farm gates instead of having them assume it. So Kirstie, if you want to get started with some slides.
Yeah, absolutely. So can everyone see those? Yeah.
Yep.
Hopefully. Excellent. So yeah, so thank you so much for having me on tonight. It's an absolute privilege to talk to you guys. I can see some familiar faces as well, which is excellent. So I am going to just very briefly bring you through kind of what Farmer Time is, and kind of advocating for ourselves and advocating for farming. So yeah, so I'll start away. So it's honestly, I love doing these sorts of talks to you guys because, you know, women are excellent advocates, and we're becoming much more aware that our voice has impact and our voice is needed in conversations. So you're absolutely the right people to be talking to about Farmer Time. Sorry, does someone have a question? Oh, no. Okay, I'll keep going. So very briefly, what we're going to talk about tonight is what is Farmer Time, why programs like this are needed, what can I do about it, how can I do it, and then there's plenty of space for questions and answers at the end. But if you do have questions in the meantime, please do just ask away. I'm more than happy to chat about all of that. So what is Farmer Time? So I suppose, do people know what Farmer Time is? If they come across it? No? Okay, cool. Yeah. That's a good place to start. So Farmer Time is essentially a program where we connect farmers and the classroom. So that's Farmer Time's job. And it's run out of Airfield Estate. Now, Airfield Estate is a 38-acre working farm in Dundrum. It's a very it's a little microcosm of an awful lot of different types of agriculture. We grow our own fruit and vegetables. We have our own Jersey dairy herd, and we also have sheep and pigs and chickens. And in fact, we've just got a very fancy new chicken house that is on site ready to house 120 organic hens on the estate. And so it's when we are open to the public on a daily basis, and they come in and they get to see how food is created. And for us, that's the important thing. We're aiming to be Dublin's sustainable food hub, you know, we're a leading sustainable food city. So that's an awful mouthful of information, but what it essentially means is that we're trying to make sure that the urban population of Dublin, for example, and across Ireland, are exposed to sustainable food production in Ireland. And that means that we want to make sure that they can ask questions, that they can see it, they can touch it, they can smell it, and we're there to help answer their questions for whatever they have, whatever those questions may be. And so Farmer Time links farmers to classrooms via a virtual call every 2 weeks. So that's about 2 times a month during the school year. And the calls last between about 15 and 20 minutes. Sometimes enthusiastic classes last a little bit longer. But it's during the school terms, and it's a pre-arranged call with the topics and with the teacher. So what that means is that throughout the school term, the same farmer is talking to the same class. And that's really important for us, because what it does is that it starts a relationship with a farmer. It's not just a once-off. It's not just a visit to a farm to see calves and lambs. It's actually going to establish a relationship with that farmer, so that the students and children begin to understand how much work goes into farming, how many different aspects there are to farming. And it also allows them to apply some of their classroom learning into the real world. And that's really important for us. So for example, some of the things that we talk about with them, one farmer gave an example that in a HE class was learning with them. They took a beef animal through to from the beginning in September through to slaughter during the year, and they were calculating how much growth it was doing per day. So simple things like that that show maths, how the farmer is using it, how their feeding affects that growth rate of the animals, all of that sort of stuff. So really, really important for the student to see how their skill set can be used in the real world. Things that can be talked about with the students, we don't dictate what happens on the phone call. So that's between the teacher and the farmer. So it's really that they're allowed to talk about whatever is coming up. So if there is something in the media, for example, that's happening with farmers, or the nature deal that's come in, the students have an opportunity to ask the farmer about it and to discuss it with them. And that's an amazing opportunity for that farmer to say, oh yeah, so like the greenhouse gases, absolutely. So this is what we do about it. This is the biodiversity on my farm. This is how we produce X, Y, and Z. They get to do all of that from the first person source to the students. It's not being taken out and put into a resource. It's literally just the farmer and the students having that conversation. And that is absolutely critical for learning. And students really respond to that. So things that are covered kind of across the board, everything from livestock to crops, machinery, biodiversity, the feeding. You've got to remember that these students might be completely disconnected from farming. And so even the smallest things that we as farmers do every single day, like feeding silage, they won't even know what silage is. They won't know the difference between silage and hay. They won't know the difference between, or they won't even know why you need silage, So 15 to 20 minutes becomes filled with just one of those things. It's not 15, 20 minutes to cover all of farming at all. It's about just piecing it together for them just in a way that they can understand, but also then just covering a huge range of topics, but maybe only one per call. But they also love talking about the social side of farming, so the family life of farming. We had one farmer that the coverage out on his farm was pretty poor, so he used to send in videos during the week to the teacher. And then he'd do the call from his office. And halfway through one of the calls, his kids rocked in to say hello to the other kids from Dublin. And the kids were like, "You have children?" And it's the same thing that happens with teachers. When you see a teacher outside the context of school, you don't realize that they actually have a life. But they were talking to this one farmer, and suddenly they realized, oh, like you have a family, like a family grows up on this farm. That's how disconnected they are. They just see it as a job. They don't see it as a whole lifestyle and people attached to it. One of the big things that's come up recently for farmers has been the weather, how terrible the weather has been to the start of the year. And the students are suddenly, they're complaining about not being able to get outside, but suddenly they realize that actually the cows haven't gotten out until May, and all the knock-on effects that has during the year. They're never going to hear that information anywhere else, ever. They're not going to hear it. So it gives them a huge opportunity for farmers to really advocate for themselves, to break down all the barriers, to answer all the questions, and to really, make that relationship really genuine with the students and make it long lasting. So the program itself, FarmerTime, has had a lot of successes. We started with a pilot project in 2021. We've since had 90 pairings, so that's 90 farmers giving of their time to schools, which has been amazing. That's 480 learning hours. One of the things that we constantly come up against with teachers and trying to get food and farming onto the actual curriculum of primary and secondary is that there's no space. And it's right, there is, the correct curriculum is really packed already, but what FarmerTime is because it's only 20 minutes and it's backing up other subjects, there's plenty of space for it. And actually that learning suddenly adds up to about 480 hours of kids learning about food and farming, which is brilliant. We've also reached to about 2,500 students. And if you think that that's 2,500 students, that hopefully at least half of them are going home and talking to their parents about it and saying, this is what we discussed today, or this is what we talked about. And so that message gets disseminated out into the community and into families. And that's really important for something that I'm going to talk about later, which is kind of the long-term effects of this program. Other successes is that it's pretty unique with regards to being an education course in that it reaches across primary and secondary schools. So it's not just talking to junior infants and senior infants, it's talking to the Leaving Cert agricultural science students, it's talking to HE students and business students, history and geography as well. So there's a huge opportunity across all of them, all years, so from 5 to 18 for this program to work. And that's again a fantastic part of this. It's not like a food dudes program that they only get in primary, and it's not like it's only Leaving Cert Ag that uses it in secondary. It goes across all of those years, which is fantastic. It's also nationwide. Where almost every county in Ireland has farmers and schools in it. One of the really lovely things about this is that the questions really range depending on the school and the age group and things. So you have the very basic, when we were during COVID, farmers getting asked, do cows get COVID? And how do you cope with that? To one school down in Cork has a whole farming community in the school, and they're paired with a farmer up in Leitrim. And the conversations that they have about when the cows get out or what his grazing patterns are, like that's the other end of the spectrum, but it's just as amazing for the students that are in part of that, because they're having their learning needs met. It's not a stagnant, if you like, it's not a stagnant course that this is the process that happens along the way. It's what questions do you have that the farmer can answer? So it's really adaptable. We're allowing it to challenge perceptions. So about a quarter of our farmer participants are female, which is absolutely brilliant, because young girls are sitting in the class and not just seeing that they could be farmers, but they could be part of the agricultural industry. There's, the old adage, can't see it, can't be it. And one of the things teachers do report to us is, like we've talked to one teacher, and at the beginning of the year they all drew a picture of the farmer, and it was most of them, in fact the vast majority, were men, flat cap and pitchfork and tractor in the background. And by the end of the year, they drew another picture and they'd had a female farmer. And so the whole picture had changed, like there was a girl farmer, there was the black and white dairy cows in the background, because their image of a farmer has now changed for life. And that's, like you can't pay for that, like that's absolutely amazing. It's really breaking down the urban rural divide. Absolutely, we see that. One of the big challenges that we have is this divide, and it goes both ways. The urbanites don't understand what's happening in agriculture, and there can be, this movement back of, like people in, people are non-farmers should be grateful for what we're doing and how we're doing and how hard we're working. And both people are right, because they don't have the other perspective in front of them and they're not able to have a conversation. And so what FarmerTime does is allows that conversation to happen. It allows everyone to understand where somebody else is coming from. And they get to ask, really interesting questions, and sometimes they are challenging for farmers, and sometimes they are about, like you take the calves away from the mums, and why'd you do that? But instead of it being an attack, it's a question. It's a genuine question from a child. And so you talk about the fact, that cows don't have the same sort of I suppose, emotional capacity as a human does. And, you know, they're still treated really well, and they grow up really well, and they still grow up really strong, and they either join the herd or they go off. And, you know, like, you have that conversation. And the earlier we have those conversations with children, the more accepting of them that they are, you know, and they're much more likely to go, okay, fair enough, that's grand. And that sets them up for life. You know, that sets them up with an opinion that will then stay with them. Around sustainable education, the program is free to schools, and it also takes it's also that the farmers give up their time for free, that 15 to 20 minutes. But, you know, honestly, the feedback that we've got from farmers, I have it on another slide further down the line. But, you know, the feedback from farmers has been that it's been really rewarding for them to be a part of it. And like, the children really do appreciate it, like all the way up to the ag science that I was thinking of a class that was just finishing up in Dublin before their leaving cert, and they're talking to the farmer about the effect that the rain had on his on getting his sheep out, and they're going to be able to add that into their leaving cert exam, and that puts them miles ahead of the next child who's just relying on a textbook in order to learn about agriculture. And that's an amazing opportunity for the students, and it's a fantastic opportunity for the farmer as well. And like I said earlier, it really opens up the agri-food industry as a future career. We, you know, in Ireland, 8% of our population is employed in the agri-food industry. So that's all the way from farming all the way through food production. And we need to keep supplying that with people. And if they aren't exposed to it and they don't understand it, then that population, that employment is going to be a struggle later on, because we won't have the people to go into it. So it's a great forward thinking move for that. Talking to a farmer all year long means that they get to see nature and environment through all the seasons. This is a great example from one of the farmers that we work with. It's hedge laying. And if you think if children come out to your farm, they see just that one day. They don't get to see the stuff that you're talking about. And this is what one of the farmers was showing them, you know, like marking out the fence, he was planting it. Then they started to grow, and then he had to weave them in, like amazing things that they have absolutely no idea when they're driving along the road. They've no idea that much work goes into those hedgerows, but now they do, you know, like simple things. It gives them an idea of the life cycle of animals. They're going to see all the build up to lambing and calving, all of the preparations that go in, the cleaning of the houses, the getting all of the equipment ready, the different feeding of, you know, the cows and the ewes to get them ready for birth, and then the aftercare of them as well. And they get to see the animals heading off to the abattoir as well, you know, like, so they get to see all of that if that's the way that the class goes. It gives them a much deeper understanding of how farmer, nature, environment all work together, which is really important. They don't see them in isolation anymore. They see them as things that are working together for good. And it builds a life-lasting relationship. And by that, I mean that when these future consumers go to the shops and they're making that split-second decision between buying Irish and buying something else, they're much more likely to buy Irish because they know PJ, or they know Roisin, or they know Kate, you know. So it's about that relationship. You know, they're much more likely to support local and Irish if they have a relationship. If they don't have a relationship, it means nothing to them whether they pick one thing or the other. So what the farmers say about the program is that we asked them what's been the most positive aspect for them about the program. We talked about the kids and how great it was to talk to them, and, you know, engaging with children that will probably never stand on a farm. That's the big thing. You know, the great thing about this program is that we're not asking you to take 30 kids out onto your farm every 2 weeks, but you can bring them inside the tractor. You can bring them into the sheds. You can show them the crush, and they have that engagement with it. Excuse me. And it's great to feel like you're making a difference in the huge disconnect that exists between where food comes from and kids of today. They do seem genuinely interested in finding out more, and that is across the board. They really do want to find out more. Teachers love it. Great insight, newfound appreciation. The fifth years love the calls and still talk about them. They were especially concerned about a suspected TB in his herd. So this is the stuff that farmers are talking about with them. They're saying, you know, like, we have a TB test coming up, and then you talk about what TB is. You talk about what TB is, and then you go through the process with it of why they're worried about it, what can happen if they do have TB. We do tell a story quite a lot up in Airfield about a farmer that was he was getting married during the year, and the class genuinely were asking the teacher whether they were going to be invited or not. Like, that's how good the relationship was, that they honestly kind of thought at some stage where the invite will arrive into the classroom and we'll be forming a guard of honor for this guy at his wedding. That's how invested they are in this relationship, and they really do love it. The students absolutely love the program as well. Very beneficial, really useful. My favorite quote is the last quote, because it's from a special needs child who told us that they hypothesized that FarmerTime would be unhelpful. But after listening to Noel and asking questions, I found that it helped me to visualize textbook knowledge into real life. And for me, that's what it's all about, you know, like, it's about taking what they're learning and making it real for them and showing them all about it. So FarmerTime is really a chance to change the future. That's as simple as it is. You know, you talk to people, you change their opinions, you form that relationship. It improves students' understanding of food and farming and the environment. It enhances for them the curriculum through real world examples. And it's engaging and empowering students across Ireland. So when they spend their money when they grow up, will influence our food, the environment, and the economy. And that's key, you know. The idea that if we can get across to them that the idea that where they spend their money will have an impact on their country, their environment, and their food, well, then we're winning, you know, and we're winning for future generations as well. So I will put this up again at the end, but that QR code, if you scan it, and I'm sure that the slides will be going out afterwards as well, and so will the recording, that QR code will bring you to the FarmerTime website, where I'm sure you're all going to be signing up immediately after this. But there's lots more information up there if you want to have a look. And I want to introduce Emma as well. She is our FarmerTime coordinator at Airfield. So she'll be the person responding to your emails and all that sort of stuff as well. But we'll come back to her in a few minutes. So I suppose what's next for FarmerTime? We want to grow it. We want to create more resources to support farmers and teachers. There's going to be a monthly newsletter going out that will help farmers and teachers to, if they get stuck on topics, all of that sort of stuff, and to support their conversations and interactions. So I guess that's my sales pitch for FarmerTime, but I wanted to talk to you just very briefly as well about why we need programs like this. So I think it's fairly obvious to us why we need programs like this, but sometimes a few statistics don't hurt. So this is a map of Ireland. This is a map from the CSO, which shows us how distributed different areas are with regards to cities, urban towns. Essentially, when you look at that map, the only bits that are counted as highly rural or remote, i.e. not having any urban influence really, are the dark green areas. Okay, so everywhere else is effectively at least moderate to high into like urban influence, urban towns or cities. Okay, so that's a lot of Ireland that is not going to have a huge amount of you know, rural pockets all through it. We have a population in Ireland of 5.3 million. Only 2% of that population are farming, are employed in farming, forestry, or fishing. That means 98% of our country is not farming in forestry or fishing. That means technically there is 98% of our population, or close to that, that is unconnected with the land. Okay, so not directly employed within farming and fishing and forestry. Of that 2%, 83% are male and only 17 are female. So those are from the Central Statistics Office from 2022. So it won't have changed massively in the last 2 years of those numbers. Now, these are looking at employment, not people living on farms, but employed by farming. So that means that there's an opportunity for a huge disconnect to happen between farming and the people who are eating the food and the people who are creating the food. But the good news is that about 17.5% of our population are of school going age, between 5 and 18 years old. So first off, they have pester power. They can go and tell mommy and daddy that they really need to go and eat Irish if they're talking to their FarmerTime farmer. But then they are the consumers of tomorrow. And we want them to spend their pounds and euros wisely. And we need to control the narrative. Now, control the narrative sounds quite harsh and quite a little scary, but I'll kind of break it down over the next couple of slides, because what we have is this narrative. Now, some people will have already seen these slides when I talk at other events about kind of advocacy for women in farming and for farming in general. This is how my kids were brought up and how I was brought up. I'm from an urban background, with the kind of Usborne family tales, farmyard tales. So very cutesy bootsy, nice animals, all in, tractors getting stuck in ditches and being able to be pulled out. It's always sunny, and everything is solved by the end of 6 pages, and there's no big problems. Also nothing dies. I think that's important. It's all very, very happy. And then there's nothing until you become an adult and you start listening to the news. And the news about farming is that it's killing the planet, that there's issues with climate change and cows, that farmers are protesting and blocking up Dublin streets or Cork streets or Limerick streets because they're protesting. And there's nothing in between those two narratives happening. And so the public who are unconnected with farming, or the non-farming background people, have to believe what they're hearing because they have nothing else coming and telling them anything different. So when we ask the question, what can I do about it? We ask, why is your voice important to food production and food businesses? And specifically your voice as females and women in dairy, your voice is incredibly important because women by nature are good communicators. We're hardwired to talk to each other and to be able to communicate in a way that sometimes that men aren't. And we also are very good with emotional intelligence. And what I mean by that is that we are very good at reading a situation. We're very good at understanding what is necessary for a situation, whether people need comfort or if they need encouragement. We're very, very good at that. Again, we're kind of hardwired for that. The other important thing to realize is that 70% of food decisions in the home are made by one person. And that person is usually a female. Think of yourselves in your own house. Who does the main shop every week? Who decides what gets eaten in the house? All of that sort of stuff. The vast majority across Ireland would be that it would be the female in the house making the decisions about those food choices. Your voice as a female farmer echoes much more or reverberates much more with another woman than it does with a man talking to a woman. Okay? And so having that conversation with them is really important. Young people, it's also been shown that young people trust female voices, opinions, and experiences more. They come across as much more genuine. They come across as much more trustworthy. And that's incredibly important for not just the future agricultural workforce that we talked about before, but also the policymakers. If 98% of Ireland is not employed directly in farming, you can guarantee that those children, that 17.5% of our population, a huge percentage of those are going to go into the workforce. They could potentially become policymakers, they can become county councillors, they can become all of the people that have a decision on what happens in your area. And if they have no connection to farming or no understanding of how farming works, the decisions that they make could affect you in a way that is unhelpful to you. And so by talking to young people and making sure that they have this lifelong connection and an understanding of how farming works in Ireland and why it works in Ireland, we're influencing the future, and we're trying to make sure that they'll have an understanding of what's coming, down the line. And so when they're sitting in an office somewhere making a decision, an executive decision about maybe working for a retailer and deciding how much to pay Irish farmers or not, if they have an understanding of Irish agriculture, if they've a relationship with a farmer, that decision might be easier for them to go in favor of farmers than it would be to kind of, gives them at least pause before they make that decision. And so this is the long game that we're playing when we start talking about education and educating children. It's the long game we're playing. It's not just about giving them a great start in life, which absolutely we are as well, with regards to kind of giving them those real world applications of their curriculum. But we're also making sure that they'll have a bit of a conscience around farming in the future as well. And so your voice and your advocacy is really important in those situations. Talking to the shopper so that they understand why it's important to buy Irish and buy local. You're talking to the future agricultural workforce and policymakers too. And so that voice is critical. If that voice isn't there, that vacuum will be filled by somebody else, and it will be filled with misinformation or bad information. And so there's a real challenge for us as farming advocates to stand up and say, no, actually, this is what's happening, or this is why we're doing this, or this is the decision that we've made. Because none of us woke up in the morning and thought, I'm just going to farm this way because I like farming this way. Some of us, maybe some of us are lucky, but there's decisions in the way that we farm that are made for us through legislation, that are made for us through different farming methods. And so we have to be okay with talking to people about that and the reasons why we're doing it. So how can you do it? How can you advocate for farming? So we have this idea that the narrative is lost somewhere along the line about farming. Between the childhood and adulthood, there is no information with a farmer, like a face-to-face in farming and disconnected from farming. So we need to get rid of that kind of narrative, and we need to change the narrative. We need to be out there talking about farming, and being willing to have a conversation and willing to have a chat with people about what we're doing. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say that FarmerTime offers you the opportunity to do that. But this is a much broader conversation as well about advocacy for farming, and talking to people about it. So how can we do it? Well, being your own advocate means that you ask for what you need whilst respecting the needs of others. Okay, now that seems like quite a long sentence and quite a big concept. But essentially what it does is that when you're advocating for something, you are identifying the message that you want to get across, being really specific about it, but you're also identifying where that person is coming from. And empathy is key. So what I mean by that is there's no point in being annoyed at someone if they don't understand farming and how it works and why you do things, unless you realize that they've never experienced farming other than driving through the countryside to get to another destination. Their food is in Tesco's. They have no understanding of it. So when they hear media saying we need to reduce the herd, we need to reduce the Irish herd, they're going, well, yeah, that's absolutely fine. Let's do that. It's easy. And it's easy because they don't understand that by reducing the herd, we might be reducing the GDP because our economy is so tied to dairy and meat. So it's not as simple as just reducing the herd. And neither is it going to work as a conversation if your immediate reply is, well, why are you flying off 4 times a year to your destination and using planes all the time? Because immediately they get defensive as much as you've been defensive. So Being an advocate means that you're trying to have a conversation with them whilst understanding where they're coming from as well, so that the conversation continues rather than just stops at the beginning. So how do we do that? Well, you need to firstly recognize the opportunity that's available to you to talk about what you do. So that means that you're kind of almost preparing yourself to kind of say, okay, well, I'm going to this event, or I'm going to this place. I might be asked about dairy farming, or I might be asked about farming in general. So how am I going to respond to that? Excuse me. You then need to prepare what you're going to say. So there's an awful lot of good in doing something called an elevator pitch, which is about 30 seconds, a way of introducing yourself, getting a key point, really just one key point across, and making a connection with someone. And so that sounds like a really hard thing, but the reason it's called an elevator pitch is that if you do picture yourself in an elevator going up in it, that you have 30 seconds to kind of go, hi, I'm Kirstie McAdoo, and I'm actually head of education and research at Airfield. And I really want to talk to you about your food choices and what makes them sustainable or not. Do you know, so automatically I've given them who I am, a little bit of my credentials. So for any of you, it might be, you know, I'm Roisin Cummins, and I am a dairy farmer, and you know, I work this every single day. It's my passion and I absolutely love it. Can I talk to you about it? Do you know? So it's about putting yourself into that position. When are you going to meet people? How are you going to introduce yourself? How are you going to lay out your stall? And then initiate communication. So this can be the hardest one, because it means that you have to step outside. Advocacy isn't a passive thing. Advocacy is standing up for what you believe in as well. So it's about initiating communication. So people will talk to you if you talk to them. It's highly unlikely that at some point someone, if you initiated a conversation, would just completely ignore you and walk on. So you need to engage people. Think, what will happen if I don't have this conversation? So I was talking to Emma earlier, actually, and we were talking about like standing in line at a coffee shop and, you know, listening to someone chatting in front of us and kind of saying, they're saying, oh, you know, I switched to oat milk because, you know, gosh, you know, like there can be loads of pus in dairy milk, and we don't like that, you know, like, and that's really dangerous to you. And you're kind of going, well, that's a decision then, as me as a person who knows better and knows that that's not true. I have to make a conscious decision to say to them, well, actually, sorry, excuse me, if you don't mind, I'm Kirstie McAdoo. I'm Director of Education and Research at Airfield Estate, which is a dairy farm. And actually, what you said isn't actually correct. What sometimes can be framed as pus is actually somatic cells. And cattle, if they have a high somatic cell count, which is the body's natural reaction to an infection, they're actually taken out of the herd. And that milk isn't added into human consumption until they're better. So that's not actually true. And so you need to kind of say to yourself, what would happen if I don't have that conversation? That person would go on and tell more people that that's what is, you know, that there's pus in milk and all that sort of stuff. Whereas if you step in and you say, actually, I'm happy to have a conversation with you about this. I'm happy to chat to you and actually say, well, that's not actually true. It's kind of true, but they've twisted it a little bit. And this is what it actually is. Well, that's going to change that person's perception of milk and of dairy. And they're unlikely to go then and tell the next person that it's you know, got pus in it and you shouldn't be drinking it and all that sort of stuff. So you have to make that decision based on what will happen if I don't have this conversation with somebody. Navigating through the conversation is always going to be difficult, and it's something that you get much better with practice. But it's the basis of all good conversation, and the basis of all good debate is being open and honest. If honest to say, oh, I don't actually know if that's true or not, but I can look it up and I can get back to you. Or I can be open and say, that's not my opinion, and that's not how I understand it. This is how I understand it to be. You have to be ready. And I know that an awful lot of the time it can feel like all we hear is criticism about farming, but actually we're really proud of what we do. And we have to stand up and be really okay with talking about the choices that we've made in farming and how we farm. Like I said, we don't wake up in the morning and just make a decision on a whim. There's a reason why you do it this way. There's a reason why you've chosen to farm in this way. And we have to be proud about it. And we have to be okay to talk about it. Or else, like I said, that vacuum will be filled by somebody else. We also have to be ready to have our opinions changed. If we're looking to change other people's opinion, we have to be open to the idea that maybe some of our opinions are not correct. And that could be about thinking about, you know, the fact that, you know, again, you know, that massively generalizing here, but you know, like that vegans are all going to have an argument with you and they can't wait to have you know, a go at dairy farming and talk about the babies being taken away from the mums and all of that sort of stuff. We have to be ready to have a conversation and find and be open with them and kind of say to them, this is what I feel, and them to come back and say, well, you know, and challenge our beliefs and challenge our ideals and make us think about why we're doing it and make sure that we're okay with how we farm and what we do. That's exactly what conversation is about. So we have to be ready for that. We also have to be ready for people to ignore us and not engage with us. It's not everyone who's going to want to have a conversation, especially if their belief system is being rocked a little bit, and especially if they're being, I suppose, proven wrong in some respects, that they won't want to engage and they won't want to walk away. But it comes back to that question of what will happen if I don't have this conversation. And the reality is that if we're not having that conversation, somebody else will be having it and they'll be talking to lots more people, and we have to make sure that it's right. You know, it's that simple. We wouldn't, you know, we wouldn't want it any other way. We want people to understand what we do and why we do it. So that kind of brings me to the end of my little bit. And I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has them for me. And then I'd love to ask you guys a couple of questions around what you feel or how you feel about advocacy and how you feel about talking to people about it and what's stopping you from doing it. And maybe people have experiences of that. So thank you very much.
Super, thank you so much, Kirstie. That was a really insightful kind of insight onto what you do with FarmerTime, and you covered so much that definitely resonated with me anyway, because it's like my background isn't, you know, farming, or I didn't grow up as a little girl want to become a farmer. I met my husband when I was 21, so that kind of, and I'm not 21 anymore, and that evolved over time. So, but it was just, I suppose, his love for it, and I stumbled on, he was doing a Nuffield scholarship and we were traveling at the time. So I suppose I was heavily influenced by meeting other people throughout New Zealand and Australia. And that was like, I could see the power in that. And that completely changed my direction and my career, you know, further on the line where I went on to do my green cert. And I remember thinking, doing my green cert, I wish I'd had done ag science in school, but that wasn't an option for me. And the interest I had in it. So I really think it's something that's so important. And I think as well, for me, switching to personally, in my own experience, for me, switching from, I suppose, a different background, my background's journalism and media, and I later went into insurance based on, I suppose, where we were living. We weren't living in a city, so I didn't work in that area. But it was hard for me to be in a social circumstance and say, I'm a dairy farmer, you know, because people didn't believe me, and you know, and it was like you almost feel like you don't want that obstacle of a conversation. But I guess, and I definitely pay tribute to Nola Keffernan in this. She has met with us a good few times, but the power of being proud of it and the power of having the confidence to say it, and getting that message across. And I can see how, if I am confident in speaking about the positives of farming, about how I get up at 6:45 and work at 5 to 7, I get to see the sunrise, I walk to work. You know, there's so much positives to it, and the real win of it all is I would not go back to a corporate job ever. You know, and there's so many hurdles in farming, but it's a wonderful lifestyle, it's a wonderful job. And I guess it's getting that across. I have 3 young kids. They don't bat an eyelid when I'm in the yard. You know, they look at people funny when they question my job or I say it. So I see the power in on them seeing me do it. It's just normal to them. And I guess, you know, even working in the yard, like I suppose I work as much as anyone else does in the yard. Or I'm as, you know, I do the job, every job anyone else would do, and I think that's so important. But it's all men, and how they just don't bat an eyelid at the yard, or how they laugh at somebody coming into the yard and be taken aback by me in the yard. But it's I just do think, what, like everything you said and how impactful that is. And I think it's so important that we look at ourselves, that we are the advocates of it, and we have to take away that old stigma of what we grew up with thinking farming was, you know, because I really remember thinking doing my green cert, wow, I wish I did ag science in school, or I wish I even considered doing something agricultural based, whether if I, you know, even if you were to go work for a different company, I just think it's a, you know, it's a wonderful industry. You know, we're food producers, and we're attacked so much at the moment. Attacked, I suppose it's a real conversational point about climate. And I will say on this as well, like a lot of people think that, you know, they can be quite negative towards farming and the animals and so on and so forth. But I remember distinctively one time when we got the snow and everything was frozen, everyone was off work, the roads were closed, no one had to go to work, you know, in that situation. And I remember I was up since 6, we were up all day heating pipes to make sure we could get the cows milked, to make sure they were insulating as much as we could for the calves. It was just, they were a priority. And you just think at that time, I remember thinking at that time, you know, there's such a disconnect that we were leaving home. We weren't, you know, you were going without meals on those days. You weren't inside having snow days like everyone else. The animals were a priority. It was just, there was a disconnect there. And how do you get that across, that the farmer really does put the animals first? Like, and I personally haven't met another farmer that doesn't do that. So it is up to us, I suppose, to make that time and make that awareness. And even when I go drop my kids to school, and I see that as a real positive. I milk the cows every morning, I come back up for school run. But I get changed out of my yard gear, because I think it's so important that my kids' friends see me at the yard and presented well, because, you know, it's not about turning up and having as much muck on me as possible. And I'm not afraid to be in a situation with that, but you know, we're an advocate for what we are as well. And I think that if you were to go to a meeting or meet other people in a corporate role, you know, you try present yourself a bit better. So I do think that's quite significant as well, you know, because, and to get that connect with people that, you know, you can have a physical job and you can work in that industry, but of course we can still and the best, you know, it's just about looking at it from a point of view, you're your own representative for your own farm and your own business. So that's super important. But just everything you covered is so powerful, and I think more powerful now than ever. I think we really do need to step up and advocate ourselves, and especially for women. I do think, like, when you show the facts on it, how there's such a massive gap, and coming from a business owner, and where recruitment is so difficult in our industry, we're eliminating so much of the female side of it as well. So it's just to advocate that as well, and bring the positives into it and make them feel like this is a role you should be proud of, and this is a really wonderful job to work in, and a really rewarding one as well.
It is, yeah. I mean, absolutely all of those things. I mean, it in no other industry would they be happy to let 50% of the possible workforce walk out the door, you know, like without even noticing that they weren't even there, you know. And I just think that is absolutely it. Now, we've still an awful lot to do in women in ag, like even down to like making sure that the equipment is appropriate for women to use, like that workwear is appropriate for women, that we can get ones that, you know, workwear that fits us and all that sort of stuff. Like, that's how far back we are with regards to getting women into the industry. And we have to make those barriers easier, or like eliminate them if at all possible, but at least break them down a little bit for women to get access to this industry and understand it, and feel that they can be a part of it, and not just a part of it, but a real positive contribution to it, that they can change it. I'm constantly kind of brought back to a quote from Mary Robinson, who's my proper hero, and when I grow up I want to be her, kind of thing. And she talks about climate change being a man-made problem but a woman-made solution. And I really think that agriculture has that opportunity. Like, sometimes that the way that agriculture has or is viewed is sometimes, kind of a throwback to the past a little bit, but actually the ones that can really advocate for change and who can really show change are females in that environment, that can stand up and offer a new perspective, a new, the fact, even Rosie, that you've come from corporate and gone into farming is a huge message to people, that you don't have to just choose one type of lifestyle. You can take the skills from both and merge them together, which is super powerful. And I don't think that that's appreciated yet fully in agriculture, that there's literally 50% of our workforce out there who are skilled in banking and in business and in communications and marketing, and they're
Yeah,
just not being used.
absolutely. And I think it's an industry, like I said, you come across a lot of women who will marry a farmer, and that in itself can be it can be a hurdle, because the farm is such a, I suppose, a massive part of their livelihoods and of their lifestyle. But I think to be able to merge, and as friends of ours said to us before, it's probably one of the only industries you can merge together and have a partnership in business and work together. And if you can get the balance right, it's an incredible balance to hit. But it's having a support system as well, and even having it within Dairy Women Ireland, it's hugely important for other women to have conversations with each other. And a lot of us have a lot in common in that way, that we might not have grown up on a farm, or we might not have seen ourselves go into that career, or and then even to meet other women who have done that, and just to be, get, I suppose, it's something you have in common with them, or you can relate to them. Because from my own circle of friends, it's just not something they can relate to, and like that's so important as well. But like you said, even down to the coffee shop and someone ordering a soy milk, and I'm a big advocate for that. Like I start off with the question, like, the nutrition value of your soy milk? Can we do a comparable? When you go back to science, the science always trumps everything else. You're making, um, you know, as my husband always would always say, and I suppose I'm saying it now, is we produced one of the greatest superfoods in the world. Like it's a highly nutritious food, and we're just very poor at marketing it. And I suppose the best way to start is to do it within our own local community.
Yeah, and sometimes if you can convince your local community, that's the hardest kind of group that you could ever work with. The
Yeah.
people that, that are kind of almost immune to it, like that they're so used to seeing cows, or they're so used to seeing, all the rest of it. If you can talk to them and really convert them to understanding the work that you're doing and why you're doing it, like that is, they do talk about being a prophet in your own land,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
just that idea that, the more you engage with people, especially in your locality, the more likely you are to see change, and
Yeah.
to see change on a local level, which will spread to national level, which will spread to international level as well. So
Yeah.
it's really powerful to not let those moments pass without reaching into them and discussing them and kind of going, really, is that true?
Yeah, and not to be afraid of it, not to be afraid of the
Yeah.
conversation, and I was especially around the environmental side of things. I think a lot of people are getting afraid of it, but I think we need to be kind of, more, I suppose, step up and be proud of what we're doing. Like everyone is doing their best, and everyone is very conscious of it. So it's just a conversation, and it's just communication, and keeping the communication open and frequent. Now we do have a good few questions, or 4 questions in particular, that have come in. So I might ask them to you, Kirstie, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if anyone else has a question, please do put your hand up if you want to ask anything to Kirstie. So the first question is, how does Airfield Estate see farmer time evolve and grow over time into the future?
So we want to grow it as much as possible. We would love to see it touch almost every single child at some stage in their year, in their educational journey. For that to happen, we need a lot of farmers. And so doing these sorts of events is really important, because we need farmers to step up, and we need them to talk to students, and we need them to say that they will be there to have that conversation every couple of weeks. We say every 2 weeks. It usually works out. Sometimes it could be every 2 weeks. Some months, like in December, it might be only once, if it at all, because schools get crazy during December, coming up to Christmas, all of that sort of stuff. So what we would love is that farmers could give up their time. I think the fact that farmers give up their time for free means that we can keep the program free. And that's the big thing for us. And it can be daunting for farmers to talk to students, because each age group has their challenges, but also each age group has its opportunities. And I don't think I've met a farmer, in fact, hand on heart, I haven't met a farmer who's been involved in FarmerTime that hasn't enjoyed it. Even down to the fact that, you know, once every 2 weeks, there's a group of kids who are honestly happy to see you. Sometimes my own kids aren't happy to see me, but I know that like maybe once every 2 weeks there could be a classroom that would be happy to see me. That would be great. But it's really just that we want to grow it, and we want to make sure that it's in every school. The fact that it is kind of almost stealth getting food and farming into education is also really attractive to me. The fact that children and students are seeing how their curriculum in the classroom is applied in real life, whether that's maths or geography, you know, or any of the STEM subjects, the science, technology, engineering, and maths. Like, I just think what an amazing opportunity to inspire a generation of agricultural engineers by letting them explore the, you know, the inside of a tractor with you and understand the technology that allows GPS to you know, move the tractor around, or, you know, how, you know, the engine works, or how the plowing works, all of that sort of stuff, you know. Those are the things that we kind of sometimes take for granted when you just hop into a tractor and you drive off, you know. We're used to it. But actually, you know, children don't see that at all. So giving them that opportunity. So Airfield really wants to see it grow, and we really want to see children become really excited about seeing their farmer every 2 weeks. That would be absolutely amazing.
Okay, brilliant. The next question I have for you is, does Airfield Estate own the FarmerTime initiative?
Yeah, so FarmerTime is a international program. So we work with England on it. So we're the owners in Ireland. The program is the same across all of the different international countries. So Tom Martin was the founder of it over in England, but it's also in Finland and in Australia. It's just starting up in New Zealand. Sweden have it as well. So all the same process. It's all free for students to get involved in and schools to get involved in. And it also opens up the opportunity for students to meet farmers from different countries. So there's an opportunity for students to talk to New Zealand farmers or Australian farmers and see what they're doing differently to Irish farmers and what we're doing at the same time. Even the seasons being different is a massive shift for some students. So there's all of those sorts of opportunities as well. So yeah, so we exclusively own, I suppose, FarmerTime when it's in Ireland.
Brilliant. And the next question I have, is there any thoughts to add a physical dimension to the FarmerTime initiative?
Yeah, so yes and no, in that we have had farmers in the past who have packed up one of the calves and cows that the kids got to see during the year and drive off down to the school, and actually brought the cow and the calf down to the kids. The kids lost their minds. It's brilliant. But we don't necessarily ask it of our farmers because we understand what an undertaking it is. We also, for child safety and for farmer safety, usually pair schools not next door to their farmer. And the reason for that is that we don't want kids turning up on your doorstep, kind of being like, this is your farm, this is our farm now, you know, like, and getting involved, and there's a health and safety risk with that. And also just that we want to make sure that there's a respectful distance to what farmers are doing and what's happening on their farm. So we absolutely would not say no to a farm visit, that's for sure, but we don't ask it of the farmers at this stage.
Yeah, okay, completely understand the logistics of that. Managing my own tree for an hour sometimes can be difficult.
Exactly.
The fourth question, do any agricultural businesses or authorities officially support FarmerTime, so by endorsing it or funding it?
Yeah, so the Department of Agriculture has just come on board and supporting what we're doing, which is absolutely brilliant. We do need sponsorship for it because Airfield is funding it ourselves. Like, so we fund the administration kind of side of it and the time that takes, the creation of resources, all of that sort of jazz. So there is a cost always to running these programs, which is unfortunate. We've had sponsors in the past that have sponsored us for a few years. But we're very conscious that we want to make sure that we make the right choice of sponsor. We're not looking just for anyone to sponsor us. We're quite clear that the if you like, the moral guidance of FarmerTime is untouched by the sponsors. So by that I mean, like, we will not, ever really, we won't be asking. So if we got sponsors, if we were to take sponsor from something like, oh gosh, I don't know, like Nestle, for example, that they start, that they say you need to mention this, and this
Yeah,
in each
like the ethics
call.
of it, essentially.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
we're very clear that farmer time is about the genuine relationship and conversation between the class and the farmer. Nothing is off the cards, but nothing is on the cards either. Like, we don't want that to taint the relationship in any way.
Yeah.
So that's something that we would be very conscious of when we're picking sponsors to work with.
Brilliant. And then I suppose just a question, or I suppose an interest, like just wondering from the point of view, like what, just your own opinion on this, but what has been the most impactful thing you think has come out of Farmer Time, or that stands out to you?
So we Airfield were recently at Bloom in the Phoenix Park, and we were working with the National Dairy Council, actually, in their garden for the 5 days. But we were one of our staff was standing there, and a lady came up to her and said, "Oh, it's great what you're doing. Did you know there's a great program that links farmers to classrooms, and they talk about farming." And my colleague Elaine was like, "That's us. We do that." That's so great to hear. And she told us a story. So her daughter is a teacher in a very deprived part of Dublin, and she joined Farmer Time, and they have an amazing farmer out in Sligo, and a female farmer actually out in Sligo that they're paired with. And they had a little boy from Poland who had come to Ireland, and he wasn't really speaking at all much in the class, was learning English since he had arrived, and was really kind of struggling. However, it turned out that he suddenly started speaking because of Farmer Time. And the reason for that was that he came from a farm in Poland, and he couldn't wait for the 2 weeks to go until he got to speak to the farmer in Sligo. And that was enough. That was the key for the teacher to see what he was interested in, what brought a little bit of life to his eyes, and a little bit of a spring to his step, and got him involved in the class. And honestly, like, I couldn't ask for a better impact than that. To be able to have a child see themselves in this situation, and learn from it, and want to talk to the farmer about it. And that wouldn't have happened if Farmer Time wasn't in that classroom. And to me, that's absolutely brilliant. Like, I can't tell that story enough. Because I just feel like, gosh, how many other classrooms could that happen in, that you're just waiting for, that kid who really loves animals to be able to talk to a farmer, even though they've never met a farmer or don't have a farmer in their family. Who are you waiting for? What's going to happen? What magic will happen because of a conversation? And that's so powerful. So yeah, so that's my most favorite. That's my newest most favorite moment about Farmer Time and its impact into children's lives.
And I think that's a fantastic, and I think that's, I'd always say, having kids, like, they're so drawn to the farm. They're so drawn to, even if anyone has small kids, they're so drawn to, farm animals, like toys or tractors. And I know, like, more recently, my son, he graduated from Montessori, and he had in his book to answer some questions, but one of them was, when are you happiest? And it was, when I'm on the farm. So I think as well, it's just for me, it was the realization, like, how they, as children, how they're so happy because we look so much, and we cater so much for sensory needs sometimes. Like, you're thinking of messy play and all these things we do, and we forget how just having them out in nature just is, as much as we love it, and how we try to prioritize it, obviously. But I think everyone feels better coming in from out spending time outside, or being in nature, or working with animals. Like, it's so important. Again, just another question on it, Kirstie, I suppose. Like, farmers, we're not very good at, I think it's probably, as my grandmother used to always say, the farmer never reveals his herd number. And that's so true. But from a business aspect, do you go in from that point of view of numbers, or what they could earn from it? Like, or what it, I suppose, it's important to educate them on it, but do you talk facts? Do you talk figures? Do you talk how they could make a living out of it?
Yeah, so it depends very much on the class, but I think one of the things that we're we really encourage is that open, honest conversation. So when
Yeah.
farmers are talking about it, we have one farmer guy doing farmer time with us who works full time. And he does, he send, farms kind of part-time, and he's sending videos during the week to the teacher, and he does it from his food processing plant at lunchtime. That's when he does his time call with them. But they have the viewing, and I think that's really important for people to understand that farming is hard. Sometimes you need to have another income coming in. And but it's, again, that ties back to that message that we're trying to get them to understand, which is your euro makes a difference.
Yeah.
So if we're telling you that if you buy local, so there's fantastic statistics that do show that if you spend a euro in a local shop, 70 cents of that stays locally. Whereas if you give your euro to one of the larger kind of non-Irish retailers, only 17 cents of that stays locally.
Mhm.
So it's a huge difference to the local economy. And so when we're talking, to farmers, those are the sort of things that we will pass out in resources and kind of say to them, like, these are the things that are important for people to know. Because if you don't know it, it's not going to change your opinion on it. You're going to make a
Yeah.
choice and go to the easier shop sometimes and go to the big shop where you can do all of your big shopping. And when you're there, you're choosing on price rather than whether something was Irish or not. And so those choices are what we're trying to affect. So yeah, so we do talk to them about it. Like our own farmer in Airfield does farmer time as well. And we milk once a day. That's a decision that we've made. And I know that they've talked about in the past, the choice that was made between milking once a day and the resultant reduction in yield versus the time that the farmer has freed up, and the health of the animal, potential health benefits of the animal, all of that sort of stuff. The fact that they're only walking in and out of the parlor once a day for feed problems, the fact that they have potentially less other issues because it's only filling and emptying once a day rather than twice a day. So all of those conversations, but mostly about the labor. So the idea that actually, for us, the reduction in yield um wasn't as impactful as the increase in productivity for the rest of the day with regards to the farmer and their time. So all of those conversations are up for grabs when you have this, and that comes with the age group that you have that you're talking to with Farmer Time. And so at the end of every year, Emma reaches out to all the farmers and gives them an opportunity to give us feedback about how the program went for them. But also gives them the opportunity to say to us, can I change year, or can I not talk to the junior infants next year? And it'd be great to talk to the Leaving Cert, or vice versa, that the Leaving Cert was a lot. So can I talk to junior cert or maybe higher primary school? And we'll try and accommodate all of that sort of movement within it so that people are talking to an age group that they're comfortable with,
Yeah.
and that the conversation is easy and flowing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and look, that's it. It's, as we said, like a lot of, and I think a lot of people would agree when they say it's a lot of it is the disconnect that can be there.
Mhm.
And it's just getting them informed, or being, I suppose, available to answer questions that they may have without people want, like, so I know a lot of people I would speak to might say, gosh, I didn't know that, or I don't want to
Mhm.
ask, but it's just a silly question because it's, I suppose, that, if you don't grow up in it, or if you're not surrounded by it, or immersed in it, you're not going to know about it.
Mhm.
Um, so how, like, if anyone did want to sign up to Farmer Time, what's the I suppose the best way to go about it, or what would they have to do, or is there much involved?
So you head off to the Airfield website and you can sign up there. So
Yeah.
you put in Farmer Time on the website and the information is all there, and there's a little form that you click into and you give us your details and we'll get in contact with you. Um, the next thing that happens is that we guard a vet all of our farmers. So that can take a little bit of time. But what guard vetting is, I mean, most of us will have done it if we've worked with kind of clubs and societies and stuff, but it is a form that we get you to fill in. We need 2 forms of ID just to check that you are the person that you say you are, a proof of address, and then we'll put that into the system and you get an online form back from the Garda Vetting Bureau that you fill in with your addresses, just to kind of any addresses that you've had in your life. And
Okay. And
then
if anyone is already currently Garda vetted, do they still have to do
no,
it? No.
yes,
Okay.
unfortunately, you still have to do it for every
Okay.
different organization. It's a
Yeah.
real pain,
Yeah.
but it means that that organization knows that you are Garda vetted.
Okay.
So it's a simple process once we have the paperwork done, and it usually once that online form is filled in within 10 days, it has come back and said that, you know, you're fine and all the rest of it. And then we pair you up as soon as we've got a school, or if we have a school already, we'll do that faster. And then obviously time of year. This time of year, there's no schools because it's
Yeah.
summer holidays. So it'll be September. But yeah, plenty of
And
time to get the Garda vetting done.
is it from September then till June, just a whole school year?
Yeah, so usually it doesn't start the first week of September because schools are bananas. So you usually kind of kick off towards end of September and do a few calls before Christmas. And then it's usually a little bit more kind of regular after Christmas because there's a little less going on in on a school calendar. But
And a
yeah,
bit more
it's
going on farm.
exactly, yeah. But interesting things to talk about.
Absolutely. This spring was very interesting.
Yeah, that's the word I'm
Yeah.
going to use. Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll go with that one.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions that they want to ask to Kirstie, or have, if there's anyone else wants to say, just please do put up your hand or ask
Yeah.
any questions
And
for
I
her to
suppose,
answer.
yeah, just as well, if there's been any situations where you wish you had been you'd been advocating for farming or any of that sort of stuff, like that you would like to run past or ask advice on as well. Absolutely, please do just ask.
Yeah. Yeah, no, look, it's something I know myself. I'll definitely be. I do remember when I was informed about it before, and I remember thinking that's definitely something I'd love to do. And as well, just on our, like, say for example, my own kids' school, would I have to ask them to sign up to be a participant? Is that
Yeah,
something, just in
exactly.
case
So
anyone wants to encourage their own local schools to do it?
absolutely. So it's the same page on the website, except it's a form for teachers instead of a form for farmers. And if you just ask the teacher to sign up there, we'll get in touch with them as soon as possible and start. And if you have farmers available, we'll pair them up. And if
Very well.
not, we'll put them on the waiting list until a farmer becomes available and we'll keep them in touch.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, look, I don't think we have any more questions. But I just want to thank you so much, Kirstie. You really
No
given
problem at all.
insightful detail onto what FarmerTime is, and you're doing fantastic work. I think it's so important, especially for our industry. Like you said, it is a long game, but it will definitely have massive impacts on the industry and on the younger people. Like you said, it's whether they're going to be farmers or not, they may influence it in another way, or
Mhm.
speaking within their home to their parents, to their peers, or if they had a job in a different industry where they might have to make decisions um, based on, I suppose, what would affect us, and that's ongoing. So I just think it's so important, and the message that you got across today is so valuable. And I think I, for one, definitely will hopefully be signing up for it in the next couple of
Yes.
weeks. I'd love to get involved, and it's so, like, as a mom as well, I just think it's so important for our kids to have such a strong education around it, and a connection to where their food comes from, and who's working in the industry and who's doing it for them, and just have the respect for that as well. And I suppose just to break the stigma, because I'm a product of that. I'm a product
Mhm.
of, it's not something I came from, and I guess when you see how much work goes into it, and it's not even that, but it's a wonderful lifestyle, and it's something that I think a lot of people that might not think it's an industry they'd like to work in, if they got a
Mhm.
bit more education around it, they definitely would. And a pure example on that is we get au pairs, and we get them from a school every summer in Austria we're linked to, and it's a boarding school of a dairy farm. And we had a girl last year, and she was with us for 3 months, and she worked on the farm. She was 17. She'd come down to yard milk with me. She was fantastic now.
Mhm.
Coolest girl ever, amazing at skiing. And, I remember saying to her, like, not many 17-year-olds in Ireland would be keen to go milking or keen to work in the yard.
Mhm.
And she pulled ragwort with me all summer. And she came with us on our family holiday to France. And when she went back, I said to her, Sandy, what was your best part of the summer in Ireland? And she said, farming, milking the cows. And I was
Oh,
like,
really?
yeah. And I was just like, God, I was laughing, but she's gone to a boarding school that milks cows. It's on a farm, and they have classes that is based on nutrition, and she has such a connection, or the connect between nutrition, farming, and the work, and she loves it. She absolutely, and we have a girl from that school this summer as well. She came 2 weeks ago, and she's just a breath of fresh air. It's incredible how, yeah, again, this cool girl that's like loves farm, and she said, like, you know, that's what she wants to do, you know, and it's very hard to get into farming in Austria, obviously given the terrain, and she's from a farm as well. But you know, it was just to see the importance of education around it and how that influences people, and especially young girls. You know, I think that it's a lot harder for them to stand up and say amongst their peers, you know, I want to be a farmer. But just seeing that firsthand, I've gone through it. You know, I find that really difficult to go from a completely different world to sit around a table or be in a social circumstance and say I'm a dairy farmer. You know, it kind of, yeah, it stops the crowd. Like, you know, they don't expect it, but that should not be the case. And those, you know, the two girls that have been, you know, that we got through that school, I just thought how powerful that was down to education, that somebody of peers at that age in Ireland, like why we don't have that strong connection, that strong education to it, when we have such a massive industry. And this was a girl coming from Austria that was like, you know, looked at Ireland as just the pinnacle of farming. So I just think, to me, that was a big eye opener, that we have a lot to do still, and you're doing amazing work around that. So thank you. Thank you.
Well, thanks to all the farmers that are doing it. You know, like, we're just the coordinators, but it's really all of those farmers that are standing up and willing to have that chat and that conversation, and share their life a little bit with students. Like, that's who it is. And you know, like I said, you know, there's kids waiting for that information and just wanting to see that, and you never know what conversation is going to change someone's life. But you can bet your bottom dollar that if you don't have that conversation, nothing is going to change.
Yeah, and I think as well, you know, as they say, you can't change someone, but you can absolutely influence them. So I think that's key as well. But look, thank you so much for, I suppose, facilitating tonight for Dairy Women Ireland. We really appreciate it. And if anyone is interested, they can obviously email you as well if they have any questions, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but look, I definitely will be signing up for it. I think it's so important. Yeah, and thank you again.
Thank you. Thanks for having us on. Really do appreciate it.
All right. That's super. Thanks so much, everyone.
Great. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye now.
Bye.
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 Thank you.
I'll stay with you there, Mela.
Yeah, it was excellent.
You think so?
Well done. Thanks, Kirstie, so much. That was really good. Really enjoyed that now.
I think she's gone, is she?
And Emma as well for logging on.
Yeah.
Hang on now.
We still have two.
Yeah. So I just end the meeting now.
Yeah, perfect, Mela. Thank you so much. Do you want to turn off the recording, actually?
Yeah, good plan.